Thanks for that brilliant introduction, Vince. It's great to be with you all this morning. Really excited to be joining you for your challenge and helping you a little bit with your branding side of things. I thought Vince asked me to talk a little bit about branding in the era of digital marketing. And I thought that perhaps what we should do to kick off a little bit, because we've got various people from various different backgrounds here, is to actually talk about what a brand is and what we understand to be a brand, because we've got lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds. So what I wanted to ask you, everybody in the room, first of all, show of hands, who thinks that branding is all about a logo? No one.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
This is the interactive part of the show.
Anyone think that branding is just about logos, about symbols of where you come from and showing and identifying your brand? No, okay. Anyone think that branding is about advertising, which breathes meaning into a brand and helps us understand what a brand stands for? Anyone think that branding is about advertising? Anyone stick your hands up if you think that? Yeah, one or two or three? Okay, or four? Okay, a few of you. And anyone think that branding is about the product or service itself that you experience? Quite a few there. Okay, that's good. Let me tell you what I think branding is. All of those things that I just mentioned, the logo, the advertising, the product or service itself, they're all very important parts of branding. But you know what branding really is? It's what customers and end users feel in here about your product or service. The one that you're developing, it doesn't matter what you say it is, it matters what they feel it is in here. It's their gut instinct, it's their gut emotional connection to what you're all about. And of course, they will base that on their actual experience of your brand. If they consume your product or your service, they'll base that gut feeling on what they've heard about you through your advertising, through the symbols that you set out in your logo and in your communications, and through what they hear about you from other people. So remember, all the way through this challenge, it's really, really important that you relate to those people in terms of what you have to offer, and that you have a very defined purpose for your product or service that you're creating. Branding is all about creating an emotional connection in here. It's not about what you say it is. So you've got to manage really, really carefully to try and influence consumers, both in terms of shaping your product or service and also all of your communications, to make sure that you make an emotional connection with people. And that's really interesting in the age of digital marketing, because of course these days we have the importance of technology coming into play. So when you're creating your brand, it's not just about Mad Men. Many of you in the room perhaps have seen Don Draper on the popular TV programme, and I like to think of myself as poor man's Don Draper, obviously not quite as handsome, but it's also increasingly about mass men. So I'm going to start off this session with you with a provocation. This is a statement made not by me, but by one of the most powerful people in marketing services today. It's a very, very simple statement, but it's quite a big one. And the statement is, the future of marketing services belongs as much to maths men and women as it does to mad men and women. And what that statement is saying is that in creating a brand, it's not just about creative people like me who will engage with you emotionally, it's also about people who are good with numbers, people who can manipulate numbers, who can analyse numbers to help inform decision making about what you do with your products and service and what you do with your marketing communications in order to engage with people. It's also about people who are good with numbers, who are engineers, who are good at building stuff, usually stuff in tech and digital, to help create an entire experience that people can actually experience. So we're not just telling them what our brand is about, they can actually experience it for themselves. So that's the provocation I'm going to work with for the course of the next half an hour. And at the end, I'll tell you who that person is. There's always been a problem with marketing, and the first thing that I want you to think about when you're developing your product or service as part of this challenge is how to measure whether or not you've been successful. Sounds like a completely obvious thing, but how do you actually know that you're achieving what you're setting out to do? This old guy here, you probably don't recognise him. His name's Lord Leverhulme. Anyone recognise the name? Yeah? Anyone? Any ideas who he is? Lord Leverhulme? Well, you may not have heard of Lord Leverhulme. He was around in the last century, so why would you? You may not even have heard of his company, Lever Brothers, that he founded. But you certainly will have heard of a load of the brands that you consume every day today that are brought to us by Lever Brothers as part of their portfolio. They include things like PG Tips, Lynx Deodorant, Flora Margarine, Cif and Persil washing powder. These guys are super powerful industrialists who produce lots of the products that we all consume today in everyday life. And they spend a bucket load of money on advertising to make sure that we know about them. Everyone will have heard of those brands that I've just talked about. The interesting thing that Lord Leverhulme said nearly 100 years or so ago was, I know that half of my advertising spend is wasted. The problem is I just don't know which half. And what he was talking about there is that we know that advertising raises awareness about products and services and brands. It can strengthen resolve to go and try one or to feel strongly about it. But it's very difficult actually to measure the absolute isolated impact of advertising and marketing on sales, because there's so many other different variables to take into consideration. Sometimes, in addition to your advertising spend, it might be competitor activity that's driving people to your door to buy your product or your service. Or it could be changing the weather. We've seen recently in the last month that all the retailers have been moaning about the fact we've had a long hot summer, so no one's been buying winter coats. It's just happened in the last month as the weather's just started to change that everyone's reporting now that sales have been better on winter coats and so on for most of the retailers in the last month. There are lots of variables that you can influence, how much you spend, what you say, what you do, but there are lots of variables that you can't influence. And measuring them all, see what impact it's had on sales and in terms of footfall, is extraordinarily difficult. Luckily, technology's always had a role for us in marketing, and that goes all the way back to the start. Lots of people will argue about this, but I did a bit of research, and the first example I could find in terms of media innovation was in the first ever print advert in the UK was a prayer book for sale produced by a load of monks. It was actually reported in Magna Carta in 1472. So when we talk about innovation, it goes back an awful long way. The motor car and the motor carriage started to take off in the United States in 1835, and instantly, in order to promote these motor carriages, enterprising manufacturers put up billboards to promote their products and services. So we started to get posters in 1835. Most of you now will be aware of the concept of product placement, placing goods and services into an editorial environment or into a filmic environment or into a storytelling environment in order to give them credibility and to subconsciously get them into our conscious. Jules Verne wrote his brilliant story Around the World in 80 Days in 1873, and he was one of the first examples in that novel of including product placement, where he mentioned loads of shipping lines in return for money to include them in the story. Not a lot of people know that. And direct marketing's old too. There's a massive American retailer called Sears who published 8,000 postcards in 1892, and that generated for them 2,000 orders, the first example of direct marketing. And in Pittsburgh in 1920, KDKA became the first ever commercial radio station. The only reason it could afford to start itself up was because all of the programming output was subsidised by advertising on the radio station. And that continues today. Anyone who tells you that they don't like advertising and it doesn't work, well, it's a £16 billion industry in the UK that every pound spent contributes another £6 back into the UK economy. And if you guys like watching Downton Abbey and X Factor, you wouldn't have any of that without advertising, because everything on ITV is paid for by advertising. In the 1950s, American agencies on Madison Avenue, like the Don Drapers of the world that you might have seen on Mad Men, started to apply the concept of psychology to advertising and to branding. What is it that people are buying? How do we make sure we don't just push out products that we've made that don't actually meet needs that customers actually and consumers actually want? Some of you may have done in your marketing courses the concept of AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action, as the pathway that people start to go through in a communication sense if we want them to do something with our brand. These sort of concepts developed very strongly during that period in the 50s and have evolved considerably in recent times. And it seems incredible to all of you guys who are all sitting around with your smartphones and tablets and laptops completely connected that the first mobile ad was launched via SMS only in 1997, which was offering free news headlines in Finland, facilitated by Nokia. And we take it for granted today. A major tool when you're going to be promoting your products and services is Google. the first place you go to search for products and services is Google. AdWords only launched in 2000. Performance-based advertising. Google get paid a higher volume for the higher number of clicks that people give against any particular keyword. And it's now 95% of their revenue. We all think of Google as a search engine that we can find anything that we want very quickly. Rubbish. Google's actually an advertising platform. That's how they make their money. The search engine just comes as the way of making sure that you're getting what you need so they can serve you up ads. Very, very clever stuff. And it seems also incredible that brands that are with us today, that are part of our everyday life, that quite frankly most of us couldn't imagine doing without, in many cases, only formed very recently. YouTube and Twitter only launched 8 years ago in 2006. And recently as well, we've seen very clever stuff starting to happen with those types of social platforms. And you can consider this in how to market your brands that you're creating as part of your project. Facebook introduced behaviour-based advertising on timelines and in profiles in 2007. You'll all have noticed that if you're interested in golf, or you're interested in a certain band, or you're interested in a particular form of fashion, how the ads that appear at the side of your profile actually reflect your interest. But that's because Facebook is taking all of the information that you provide about your social interactions and is using it to serve up targeted ads, so it's not wasting the communication about things that you're interested in around your interests. Very clever stuff. So we used to talk about junk mail. Now there shouldn't be any junk mail because all of the communication that's coming digitally to you is served up just around what you actually do, what your interests are. And some of you may have seen a recent advertisement for Old Spice. This is the guy that your guy could smell like. This came around in 2010. Interestingly, it was launched as a viral ad on YouTube. It actually, before it went anywhere near TV, it was launched as something which people shared because it was interesting, it was funny, it had something to say, completely using social networks. So it would have 30 million views. That's greater and much, much cheaper than you could ever get through a paid advertising campaign on TV. So what's coming next? A lot certainly changed. When I started Different Off 15 years or so ago, communications and branding was much, much simpler. There were a few very concentrated channels, those that you see in this little graphic that you see above. Basically, the relationship between the consumer and the brand owner was a broadcast one, where we push out messages, we try to interrupt their lives, we try to disrupt their lives, grab their attention, say, hey, I'm here, I'm great, look at me, now go and do something. It was very much a one-way path. And in order to do that, we would use tools like TV and cinema, radio advertising, press, billboards and posters, direct marketing. A few mass channels for a one-size-fits-all solution. And it would be very, very expensive if you wanted to reach everybody, and there were no opportunities to target people specifically around interest, around social demographic background. Today, those same broadcast channels are around, but we've added to them an absolute plethora of other opportunities to communicate. So I'm sympathetic to you guys when you're thinking of marketing your brand. You have a whole toolbox, a kit of tools available to you to help communicate with people. And now, as you can see, it's not just broadcasting messages out and hoping that some of it's going to stick and interrupting people's lives. It's about creating a dialogue, a one-to-one relationship which is ongoing. Most of this stuff is interactive. In fact, even a lot of the broadcast stuff, like TV, is now interactive. Most of you will have access to Sky TV, some of you will have Sky HD Plus. That records data that can be sent to and from your handset so that they can know more about you and serve up even ads that are now dedicated just to your postcode. So you have a real range of tools that you can use to bring to play and to bear on your brand. And of course, socially, you have an opportunity to talk to people on a one-to-one basis. What I'll do now is, one thing I'd like to definitely give you as a tool is when you're thinking about your brand, taking that on board, we at Different use a very, very simple planning tool, and you can write this down, you can take a picture if you want. What we do when we're taking into consideration that daunting array of opportunities that are available to us is we start with a model we call the good model. And the good model is what's our ambition for the brand, and that's very much your business aim. Why do you exist? What's your purpose? How do you fit into people's lives? How are you going to make people with your product or service in your groups? How do you make people's lives better through your product? What's your ambition? What do you want to achieve? Very, very high-end side of things. Do you want to make life easier for people? Do you want to make life faster for people? Do you want to make life more convenient? Do you want to make people feel better about themselves? Stand back from your product or service. Ultimately, what is it you're giving people at a higher level emotionally? From that point, we think, well, okay, what's our consumer challenge? Who are our consumer challenge? Who are our consumers? If we're serving that need, who's going to be buying from us, and what's stopping them from buying our product or service? What are the barriers? Is there already an established competitor in that marketplace? Is it the fact they just don't know about the products or services that we're going to offer? Is it the fact that we don't have much money to talk to people? What's the barrier that's stopping us from talking to those consumers? And then the next thing is translating that ambition, what we do for people and what we stand for, into a brand platform. And that's basically, by a brand platform, I'm talking about what's your unique selling proposition. Why should I buy it from you and not from somebody else? Drilling it down into a simple business proposition. What is it that we have to offer? And beyond that, creatively, what's your engagement idea? This is where you translate your USP into something creatively that you can use as part of your branding and as part of your advertising that you can communicate with people. Okay, so if we take Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola is it. Coca-Cola is it is the current engagement idea that they use creatively to bring to the idea to life that Coke enables you to share special moments with people. From the engagement idea, we then go to activation. And activation will be the selection of what mix of these activities could possibly work for you in order to deliver your business objectives from above. So that could be PR, public relations, using editorial, managing your reputation. It could be use of social media to create engagement with people. It could be ads. It could be your own website. A variety of activities. But don't just think of it as matching luggage. I'm going to stick the same logo and I'm going to stick the same strapline on everything. It's about taking that brand platform and engagement idea that separates you out from the rest and then applying it differently to the vagaries of and orchestrating it around each one of these channels. Take a loose idea and apply it. Don't just think of it as something which looks the same. That doesn't do the job. Because if you're using Facebook and you just plonk an ad on it which has got the same logo on it as something else, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. Engage with them using the power of Facebook to take that idea and bring it to life in Facebook. Whereas the ad needs to do a different job. It needs to raise awareness to a more mass audience. So there's a little tool for you to use. We call that the good model. It's a nice, easy way of keeping yourself and checking yourself against everything else. And I mentioned the maths people. Maths is really, really important. Everyone's heard the term big data. Because of technology, because of these things, suddenly we're generating, and because of that math previously, we're generating lots and lots of information about everything. Lord Leverhulme would absolutely love this because he was saying that he couldn't measure what was going on. Now, there is lots of data. Data is being generated by everything. And lots of tools are out there, freebies, that are available for you to find out how you're getting on. If you're using social media, then there's lots and lots of free online tools that you can use to find out how many people are engaging with you and getting on board with your messages and interacting with you. Big data, the way that I define it, is it's about volume. There's large amounts of data being generated. We need to be able, in the modern marketing era, to analyse that information quickly. It's about velocity. And there's lots and lots of different forms of data coming in. How we choose the right ones that we use to make our decisions about what we're going to do with our product. You're thinking about developing your product and launching it. You need to be able to interpret that data. So when you're developing your product or service, always think about this stuff as well. How are we going to store and protect the data that we generate around our brand, and what's that going to be? How are we going to back it up and restore it? How are we going to organise it and catalogue it? How are we going to keep costs low while ensuring that critical data is there when we need it? Because data should help you inform, however simple it is, the decisions you make about developing your product and developing your communications and knowing whether or not you've been effective. And lots of people forget this, so I'm sure that the judges will be looking for that. And it's scary where technology is taking us now. On Facebook, 30 billion pieces of content were added to Facebook in the last month by 1.23 billion active users. Zynga, it's a platform which processes information for online poker sites. It processes 1 petabyte of content for players every day, which is unmatched in the social game history. It's absolutely enormous. YouTube, more than 4 billion videos were added to YouTube yesterday. And the average teenager sent over nearly 5,000 text messages per month. And there were 60 billion searches performed on Twitter last month. So what does the future look like? More and more data being generated. Think about what you're going to generate and how you're going to use it to inform your product development moving forward. Traffic in the future is going to quadruple by 2015. And what I would say to many of you in the room is if you're considering a career in marketing, one of the biggest things that you go into is data management. Data is really, really big news. And if you are good with figures and if you're good with interpreting figures, get into data management. And we can see that by 2015, nearly 3 billion people will be online. That means there's an awful lot of stuff going around. And it means, therefore, that opportunity is absolutely massive for people who are interested in developing and managing and interpreting data. Two-thirds of surveyed businesses in North America said big data will become a concern for them within the next 5 years. Guys, there's a big opportunity out there for you. So the new model in marketing communications, to summarise all that, this is how it's worked. We used to live in an era between the 1900s and the 1960s where you sold what you made. Marketing was just about informing people about products and services that you came up with. That evolved in the 1960s to the 2000s to persuade people to buy, creating brands with personalities that people could identify with so that they would buy from them. But now, in the current era, the power of the brand in the age of digital marketing is that the brand is a relationship. It's a two-way relationship fostered by technology. So what we're all about is sustainable relationships that last a long time. I'd be very interested to hear what sort of products that you've come up with and services that you've come up with and how they're going to fit into people's lives and how you're going to keep them relevant and not fall into that trap of pushing out a message and hoping that some of it sticks. How are you guys going to create a relationship with your brand that's relevant? And how are you going to determine what purpose your brand actually serves and always think about how it makes people's lives better? How will your brand make people's lives better? And if it's a business product, how does it make life better for businesses? Very, very simple stuff. But lots of people get bogged down in the what we do rather than the why we do it, which is that purpose. Once you remember what your purpose is, everything else becomes clear. So we can see that represented also in this chart that shows the evolution of online marketing. When I started my agency off, having a website was very much de rigueur. You had to have a website to be online. It was an innovation. Make sure you've got yourself a website. Then between 1998 and 2002, it became about finding products and services. That was what websites were for. Now, websites and online platforms are all about connecting people, not with companies. Very much about relationships. So hence why we've got obviously laptops, we've got PCs, we've got tablets, we've got mobile. All of those things enable us to connect with people. And the other thing when you're creating your brand, as going back to the start, remember I mentioned it's all about what people feel about you in here. That's really, really important because 90% of decision making is emotional, not rational. I don't know if any of you have done any of the psychology around selling or not, but we talk frequently about left brain and right brain. Left brain is the rational bit that makes logical decisions. It does the maths. It's the bit that is your head in decision making. The right-hand side of it is all about creativity. It's about intuition. And the two blend together to make our decisions. I've got a question here which I don't know if you can read, but I want to ask everybody it. It's a good example of how we make decisions when we're thinking fast and slow. A bat and a ball together cost £1.10. If the bat costs £1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Anyone got any idea how much the ball cost? 5 pence. Anyone else? Right first time. 10 out of 10. Very good. I've asked this at 100 different sessions that I've done, and most people come out and say 10p, because the first reaction is that if the bat and the ball together cost £1.10, and the bat costs £1 more than the ball must be 10p. What people do when they come up with that solution is they approximate it. Rather than doing the maths as you've just done, most people approximate it. You make a very quick decision that feels about right. Well, it must be 10p because £1.10 take away 10 is £1. It's actually 5p because £1.05 and 5 makes 10. Being £1 more would actually be £1.05. And that's an example of what we call thinking fast and slow. People make their decisions literally based on approximations. They make them very, very quickly. And in fact, the rational part of our brain only usually comes into play to justify a decision that we've made emotionally, which is quite interesting. Because when you think of those eras that I was talking about of marketing, through the 60s and through to the 2000s, nearly all marketing was rationally based. I will give you a series of features and benefits, and this is why you should buy my product. Absolutely, it's nonsense. This proves that from the recent research that actually people make a decision based on that feels about right. I'm roughly happy, I roughly trust that brand, and now I'm going to come up with a load of reasons afterwards. And we can all come up with examples of how that works for us in terms of our brands. How many of us have been out just browsing around the shoe shops and have come away with shoes that we didn't intend to buy, but we're able to justify the fact that we needed them because we didn't have enough pairs of shoes? Or, you know, we maybe went to have a look at a car that we really, really liked, and we ended up buying the car even though we didn't need it, but we were able to convince ourselves of all the reasons why we needed the car afterwards. That's the way the human mind works. There's a brilliant book, if you can be bothered to read it, called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This is the latest research on the psychology of selling. So remember, it's all emotional. Make an emotional appeal to people. Think about that purpose, how you make life better for people, and that will pay dividends. Here's a little example. Basically, this is the latest form of research that's being used now, where you put a little helmet on people's heads with sensors in it, and it actually measures the brain patterns through the left-hand side of the brain, the rational part of the brain, and the right-hand side, creative part of the brain. Some of you may have seen the Cadbury's Gorilla ad that featured the Phil Collins music from a couple of years ago, one of the most successful, supposedly, ads of all time. No product in it whatsoever, but it engaged with people on a purely emotional level. And the dark patterns that start to come out, there's only a couple of seconds of it I'm going to show, start to show the way that as the ad builds up, the patterns are overlaid on top of the screen. So this is what people are connecting with on the ad on the left-hand side, and you can see the brain starting to warm up. What the hell is this about? And emotionally, the darker patterns are starting to build up as the ad builds up to the crescendo, and eventually it becomes a screen of red as the emotional side completely takes over. That's how it works, emotional connection. And that's characterized by this chart here. So, what I've asked you to do is think about technology, think about channels, and think about emotion. This is a really, really good example. Some of you may have heard of Dumb Ways to Die, a really classic advertising campaign or marketing campaign from the last couple of years. This was created by the Metro train system in Melbourne. It wasn't a TV ad campaign because they couldn't afford that. And what they found was that when they were trying to tell young kids not to go anywhere near the train tracks on the Metro line in Melbourne, it was almost like giving people a red button and saying, don't press it. The moment you see a red button that says don't press it, what do you want to do? So we had to come up with a clever way to get around that. What they did was they developed a film which was virally shared by kids, which had a humorous song to explain the reasons why you shouldn't mess around by train tracks. And then they mixed that up with some gamification so that kids could play and learn about safety. Really, really clever route. And what this did was very, very successful. Just a moment or two of it.
Set fire to your hair, poke a stick at a grizzly bear, eat medicine that's out of date, use your private parts as piranha bait. Be safe around trains, a message from Metro.
Simple, engaging. Was it effective? Well, using digital technology, that virally transmitted film and game was downloaded 50 million times. 50 million times for a very, very small budget. So you don't have to have huge amounts of money to be effective. The game was downloaded 30 million times. And in fact, the first time I found out about this particular phenomenon was when my 11-year-old daughter in Gosforth in Newcastle told me about it and showed me. Isn't this great, Dad? You shouldn't play around trains. There you go. If you've got an audience as well that has a very short attention span, as many of you in the room probably have got after listening to me for half an hour or so, then you also need something quick in order to communicate with people. So that's what Burberry did when they launched their fashion range for 2013. They used Vine. I don't know if any of you have got Vine, but Vine is basically where you download a little film that's on a 6-second loop, so it's very, very instantaneous. So what they wanted to do was represent their whole men's portfolio in 6 seconds. Just a nice bit of fun for people with a short sense of attention. There you go. And perhaps one of the best examples that I've seen recently, I don't know if everybody who banks with NatWest, but NatWest have had a strapline, helpful banking, which they introduced following the banking crash in 2007. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but people aren't very keen on banks at the moment, having caused what many people believe to be the recession. So in trying to rebuild their trust, NatWest came up with the idea of helpful banking, and they put it out there as a TV ad. That was absolutely great. But one of their agencies came to them and said, if we're going to be about helpful banking, why don't we use creativity, commerce and technology together so that people can experience helpful banking? And they came up with an app that you could download on your phone called Helpful Banking, the NatWest app. And it was very clever because they realised also, looking at the data, that when people go out, they're more likely to forget their wallet or their purse when they go out, or they're more likely to lose it or leave it behind than they are than their mobile phone. So what is really helpful banking is that using that Get Cash app that they developed, it enabled people to generate a 4-digit code that without a card, you could go to any ATM machine that was a NatWest machine, put in the ATM number that you've been generated on your app, and you get your money out of your account. Now, if that's not helpful banking, I don't know what is. So that's clever marketing where people are using technology, creativity, and they used an advertising campaign to promote it in order to improve people's lives. So now, what we're about as an agency is we've gone from being about that, just about that emotional connection that we talked about before, and getting people here, to also being about commerce, about money, about numbers, and about also technology. And in fact, good ideas now can come from anywhere, which is great that you've been mixed up in teams, you've been mixed up in groups from different colleges, different backgrounds. We used to say that the creativity in advertising used to be the domain of Don Draper's, the creative director in the agency. Now it can also be the coder, the person coming up programming code for a piece of digital kit. It can also be a data analyst, or it can be an account manager. It can come from anywhere. And in fact, when we hold briefing sessions, rather than just being creative people who come up with ads, we now mix together the data planners, we mix together the guys that are developing the technology, and we put them all together. And that's where really interesting stuff comes out when you start with that brand ambition. Where do we want to be and how we're going to make people's lives better? That's where the ideas like Get Cash from NatWest come from. And that's where hopefully you'll get to with the development of your ideas. And that's why within our company we've even organised ourselves to reflect that. Everything Different, as I said, and Vince said, is a group of companies, a creative marketing agency called Different. That's the Don Draper bit that you'll recognise. We have an insight and data research agency called Differentology. We have a tech and digital firm called We Are Different. And then also for stuff like this, where we try and improve lives and help develop the talent of the future, we've got a separate company called Different Outcome. See what we did there? So in conclusion, we've moved from the era of the madmen to the era of the madmen and the mathsmen. Traditional advertising and marketing techniques to data-driven marketing solutions and solutions. We believed it so much, we said it twice. And hopefully that's where you'll go with your solutions as well. And I'm just coming back to round off, I mentioned the person who made that comment that the future of marketing services belongs as much to maths men and women as it does to mad men and women. Is this guy. His name's Martin Sorrell. He's the chairman of WPP, which is the largest and thankfully British marketing services group in the world. They're worth £15 billion. £15 billion. And he says that, I saw him speak 2 weeks ago in London, and he was telling me that the Don Draper bit, the Mad Men, the creative marketing bit, is now just £3 billion of their business. The rest of it is the data and the technology side of things. So think of all of these things in the round when you're creating your brand, and best of luck with your challenge.
Great.
Go forth and multiply.
Thank you very much. Round of applause again.